guys, welcome to the last part of Horse Buying 101. We're going to show you some demos of what it's actually like to take a look at some horses and features to look for on them when you actually go to an appointment to buy one. So here we're going to catch some horses in the pasture so you can see what you're looking for when people approach their horses, when you're looking for the owner. Any behavioral issues that you might find with that. So here I'd be watching the owner approach their horse and check for their receptivity, which is to say how likely does the horse want to be caught. You can see Canary is looking at her, ears up. Now she's coming towards her. The question is this an avoidance coming towards, or is this a, hey, yeah, I'm ready to be caught coming towards? Angus is getting with the program. He says, okay, I see it's coming in time. Canary is looking and chewing. She's walking, but she's not walking towards her owner, which tells me she may not be the easiest horse to catch. She's turning and facing in. That's good, but now she's turning and walking away. So Canary the gray, not an easy horse to catch. Angus here is thinking about it. Canary is now playing hard to get. So if these were horses I was thinking about buying, this would be an important thing to note. It wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker. I just need to know that especially in large spaces, I might need to budget extra time for catching them. And it does start to point to how much do these horses really want to naturally be with people, though it's often just a learned behavior of avoidance and it doesn't necessarily reflect on their work habits. This is complicating matters because Canary is kind of getting Angus riled up. So you also want to note in a turnout situation like this, when they're being caught, you can watch their natural gaits and how they move when they're not being asked to move by humans. It's kind of also a nice indication of any underlying factors, how comfortably they move, how much they want to be moving. Clearly, Canary enjoys moving, as does Angus, as we'll talk about later. It doesn't necessarily indicate soundness. You can see earlier when she was moving that there is some stiffness in that front end. And then the other thing to note would be the owner's habits in terms of the techniques they use for catching their horse. Because if there's some successful ones, you'll want to pay attention to that so that you can duplicate those later if this becomes your horse. I happen to know with Angus, he's usually very apt to want to be caught. He's usually pretty easy to halter, so this is slightly more unusual behavior for him. But there you can see some of that stiffness in Canary's front. So you can see Liz's techniques in approaching Angus, who she's working to catch right now. She's going slow. She has her hand out. It's kind of an invitation. He comes up to her. That's a nice sign that he's a generally friendly horse. You can see that he's comfortable getting that halter on. He's not avoiding once the halter is near his face. He's not trying to get away from it. The licking and chewing, that he's comfortable with this process. He's kind of happy to be caught. He's standing nicely and not fighting her in any way. In this case, because we're catching two horses, having Angus caught should help Brittany be able to go over there and get Canary. So here you can see Brittany using her own motions to try to control Canary's, both in terms of stopping forward motion and the invitations. When Canary looks at her, invitations to come closer. Now that Angus is gone, Canary looks a little less apt to want to run around and play. And Brittany, so the owner, taking it slow. And then she finally gets a nice turn in. That tells me that this horse is probably baseline friendly, just plays some games in pasture. There you can see she's a little uncomfortable with that lead rope coming over her head. You can see her kind of avoiding with her head as she does that. And you can see the owner's techniques where there needs to be a little petting first. She can't go straight to the halter like Liz did with Angus. And there's a little bit of avoidance there with the head kind of bobbing up and around. So that tells me that you'd want to look into this horse and kind of her poll and ear area sensitivities there that she might have. She's not actively, you know, trying to run away or pull away. So she's not completely against having the halter on, just there might be some sensitivities up there to watch out too. So this horse has some specific techniques that she needs both for being caught and for being haltered. But you can see now as she's leading very comfortably with her owner staying nicely back, not running or pushing or pulling. So those are good features to note when an owner's handling. Okay. Yeah, with the horses that you're thinking about buying is to watch them from all angles. And so watching them walk from behind, for example, as you can see, Angus's tail is a little off to the left. That can indicate some pain, for example, in the spine. If there's some asymmetry that way, you can also watch their legs and how they track. Here you can see that that left hind, for example, kind of angles in as he walks. And so that's something I'd want to see him moving through his gaits to check that that's not going to cause soundness issues. Because it looks a little concerning. There's a twist there in the hind that I might be a little worried about. But you can also see as he's leading that he's very polite. He's not challenging his owner. He's not being pushy. He's walking along nicely. These are all good things to note about a horse. As you watch him from the side, and you'll want to watch from both sides to make sure all the feet are tracking evenly, that those hind feet are coming up nicely into the tracks of those front feet so that he has mobility in the hind. Since he's got a little bit of ear pinning there, so that might, we'd want to think about attitude. What does that mean about his attitude? So as I'm looking at this horse, I'm noticing right now he's not standing square. So I might ask the owner if she can square him up a little bit, which would just be try to get all those 4 feet standing even. So maybe back him up just a pace, if you will. So it's another thing to note. How readily does he back and respond to asks for movement? We're not perfect, but we're in the zone here. So then I would look at conformation. So I want to look at kind of how well put together is he. So I can notice from the front, he's toeing out a bit in the front. So that may affect things. I can see that this right front foot is fairly vertical, the angle in the pastern, which tells me he's got some club foot happening here. I might pet him and see his reaction. Here you can see he's kind of putting his ears back a little bit, but he's not responding in any way that I wouldn't like. And so I feel him over as I'm going. I'm noticing these white marks here, which indicate that he had a badly fitting saddle at some point. And so that might be an indication there might be some back pain. And so as you see, as I'm pushing, his ears are going back a bit, which tells me he might have some soreness here. And so one of my questions would be, is that kind of temporary, or is that a, you know, is there a learned behavior there? What all am I going to be able to solve with saddle fit, correct saddle fit? He's letting me touch back here. That's nice. I'm gonna touching over him, touch down these back legs. I don't know if that's a little sensitivity there, or he might just be responding to, she's gonna pick up my foot. So that's nice that he's does that easily. It's a bit of a puffiness back here, probably a wind puff. That tells me that at some point he was probably worked pretty hard, that he's developed that there. And so that just tells me a little about his history potentially. As I'm looking at him from the side, I'm looking at things like his shoulder angle here, which you can see he's got a fair slope. So that tells me he's probably got good reach on this side. I do want to make sure that's even on all of the sides. He's got nice withers, so I should be able to find him a comfortably fitting normal type saddle. I shouldn't need any special saddles here. It doesn't dip too much here, so it doesn't look like he's falling into sway back, which I'd look for, especially in like an older horse. There's a lot of dip there. Looking at him from behind, you can see that twist in the left hind. So that makes me wonder a little about kind of any history of injury and how he was worked. Again, I want to see him move to see any effects from that. And then coming this side, again, just touching all over to make sure. See, he's got his ears back a little there. He's a little unhappy with that, but he's not doing anything I'd worry about. So he's just checking me out. And we want to be buddies, so I want to say hi. And then looking this side, you can see there's a little more verticality to the shoulder here. So that tells me there might be some unevenness, that he's not going to reach quite as far forward with this leg as to that little wobble there. I'd kind of wonder about. He was a little unhappy for a second. But he may not have even reach on the two legs. So again, that's something I'd watch for when I start to see him move. We saw her out in pasture, so I might check out this pole sensitivity issue, and I can see, yes, she is kind of a little uncomfortable with that right now. So that's something to note about her. I'm noticing she has some major scarring here on the shoulder. So again, when she moves, I'd want to watch that. We certainly saw out in pasture and turnout that there was some stiffness, and so I suspect that that might be the cause of that. And so I'd ask the owner how that injury happened, what they know about it, what kind of treatment it received, what she's been seen for from the vet. Feeling here, I cannot feel her ribs. So this tells me that she is a little on the overweight side. I don't necessarily feel any fat pads or anything, so it's not huge obesity, but I'd want to ask about diet. What is she currently on? And then I'd think if I were going to get her, I'd think about modifications I might make. And looking down here, she's got some scarring on this leg. I can feel around it. There's nothing like puffed up or that would tell me that this might necessarily be any cause for concern. It was probably, looks like it might be a more recent injury. We still have some scar tissue pulling off there. Touching on her hind. Seems okay with that right now. And then here's another really big scar on her hind. So I'd have the same question, kind of how did this happen? I'd want to watch her moving. It doesn't look like it goes into any major muscle like that front one does, but I want to kind of ask about that as well. So I'm feeling up here under her mane, and one thing I'm feeling up here is some lumps. Right here, for example, as a gray horse, my concerns become things like cancers like sarcoids. And so that's something I want to ask about, if she's had these lumps tested, and what the results were that came back, what the vet might have mentioned in terms of being benign or being something that might need to be removed, or and so on. Just handling this petting very nicely. If we can get her square a little bit, just so I can check out a bit about her conformation. Again, watching the owner handle her and how well does she respond to what the owner's asking her to do, and she's very responsive, so that's nice. I can see in the hind right now, she's standing kind of close together. I don't know if that's a normal way for her to stand. That's something I'd want to ask about. She's kind of toeing out back there. So on this paint pony, again, just kind of meet and greet. Hi, how are you? She's not too interested right now. That's okay. I'm a stranger, so we get it. So again, looking conformation, seeing that she's got very upright pasterns, the angle. Hi, lady. All right, not crazy about me coming directly to feet. Another good thing to note. All right. So we might have a little foot sensitivity here, so that's a good thing to be aware of. What you? I'm going to touch your leg. I'm just going to do it. Okay, so here you can see the angle of the pastern is very steep. And so that tells me that she's probably going to have a very bouncy gait for that uprightness as she's moving. Also noting as I'm coming in to pet her that she definitely has some skin condition going on here. There's a lot of flakiness and patchiness in this area. So that's again something I'd want to ask the owner about what is the history here, what do they do about it. It's not red and angry underneath, so that tells me it's kind of not an active condition to worry too much about, except that it may need some protection from the sun, like Canary with all this light skin. So again, I'd want to kind of come around and look at her face as well, where you can see here there's also some probably sun sensitivity happening on her nose in this pink skin. I don't see any lumps and bumps around her nose area, so that's good. But I know that with this horse, she would need sun protection. As I'm feeling along her withers here, they're pretty wide, so she might be a harder to fit horse in terms of saddles. She's a little rounder, so that's something to also be aware of if I were going to pursue getting this pony. She does have also some skin issues kind of in the back here as well. So again, yeah, that sun protection is going to be super important for this pony. So as a fair-skinned pony in some places here, the most important places to check for sarcoids or cancers, suspicious lumps are going to be around the nose, for example, nose and mouth, lips. She doesn't have white skin around her eyes. If she did, I'd check there. And then also around the anus, if she'll let me. So yeah, and I don't see anything there. That would be another place to check. She does have some kind of crusting and lumps here, so that would be something I'd want to look into and ask about as well. Right. And if she was a gelding, then I would also check her sheath area. Not a bad idea, even as a mare, to kind of check her teats and teat area just for health in general. But yeah, as a gelding, I'd probably want to check sheath in general just for health and that things look like they've been taken care of and that there aren't any lumps, strange lumps. So as part of a horse buying appointment, I want to both see the owner handling their horse, so the horse with somebody that they're used to and whose mannerisms they communicate well with. And then I'd also want to be the one to directly handle the horse as well. So you would want to groom the horse, get to know them a little bit, get to know their quirks and how well they do that. You'd also want to see them tied. We don't have a hitching post in here right now, but you'd want to see how they do tied. There are horses who will pull back, and so those are paw behaviors that you want to be aware of before you would buy a horse. In this case, I'm gonna skip straight to picking hooves to see how she is at lifting her feet. Really important to know how a horse is going to be for the farrier, and you want to check out the health of their hooves. How well taken care of? Have they been getting regular trims? Is there anything in the hoof area? She picks that right up for me. That's nice. Dancing a little on the hind, but she's standing. So as I'm picking, I'm looking at frog health. See how well is she shedding out? Does it look like she's been having recent trims? You can kind of tell she's got this nice bevel here. Is there any white line separation? Any signs of thrush, which is a yeast infection? I don't see any of that on her. She's comfortable having her foot handled, which is good. Front and back hooves can be a different story. So you always want to check both, all four really, but make sure you try a front and the back. And when it's horses you don't know, you want to be careful that you not get kicked. So this is good behavior to note. This horse is a little sensitive in her hind, clearly. And calm down for a second. I know. Oh, Have I not been back there in forever? You. Now that she's settled back down, give that another try. Since she's sensitive back here, for my own safety, spend a little time making sure she's okay me coming down here. Ask gently for that. Give her a second. So she eventually settled into that. She's a little tense, you can tell, but she's doing all right. Again, looking at health. And you can tell she's had regular trims. There's a little bit of cracking back here, but it is springtime, so you want to be aware of what season you're looking in. Also, spring, you're just going to see more thrush generally, even on healthy horses. But again, you kind of want to know. All right. And then you would ask the owner as well. It's one thing for somebody picking hooves on their own. It's another when the farrier and their equipment comes out. So you'd want to ask the owner, how do they stand for the farrier? How often have they been getting trimmed? How do those trims go? And so on, so that you have that history. So you always want to watch the horse from the outside. So again, watch the owner handling their horse. You want to watch the horse move through each of its gaits, going both directions. I'm watching here, she has a nice eye into her owner. I'm watching this trot to see how comfortably she's moving. Since I noticed her scars earlier, I want to see what that might be affecting. And I do see that effect in the front, where she does appear to be off and not moving evenly in those front legs with a little more stiffness. So this might be a horse that I might not consider as a riding horse due to the extent of that injury and the lameness that I'm seeing there. But she is listening nicely to her owner and has nice control. So as I'm watching the beginning of a lunging session as well, I want to watch at how calmly is he standing. Again, is he listening to her signals? He responded nicely to that send, needed a little extra from behind. Watching him walk, looking for that evenness of gait, as far as hind legs tracking up. So it looks like that left hind isn't quite. Again, response to signal. Came up all right. Again, that left toe is dragging a little bit and not reaching all the way up, which I had my concerns about the twist there, but he's moving fairly evenly otherwise. He has an even cadence to all 4 feet as he moves. Also looking for that club foot, any effect from that on his gait. I'm not seeing much there. He's moving fairly evenly with that. He seems comfortable. I don't see any anxiety from him in this trot. It's a nice, slow, even gait. He's licking and chewing, getting relaxed. So he's, even though I had concerns about saddle sores and back and the way he holds his tail on that left hind, I'm not seeing a lot of discomfort from his behavior and mannerisms here. Are a little fussy getting into the canter. Some head tossing. Again, is that high spirits? Could there be some discomfort with this particular movement? Watching the how is he with his downward transitions? Does he respond to body energy? Does he need more than that? He came down really nicely and smoothly just based on his owner's, handler's body energy. So you want to watch them go both directions. That's important because they will move differently going each direction. If there's a leg that they're favoring, it'll show up differently on each side, or it may show up on one side and not the other. He turned around nicely, nice upward with very little prompting. He's looking to the outside circle here, but he's looking and chewing. He's aware of nice transition. Okay, I about said nice transition. Okay, little wildness getting into the canter there, which may or may not manifest under saddle. Sometimes they just get a little excited on the line, but it's one thing I'd want to be cautious in an evaluation like this, if you were thinking about this horse as a riding horse, to know that that's there. And that's why watching them being lunged first can be an important first step, so that you're aware of what you might be in for under saddle later. Watching how he's moving at the canter as well. Is he maintaining the gait? How comfortably is he moving? You are going to see the most soundness issues at the trot. So that's the most important gait to watch, but you do want to see how they move. How much balance do they have? Are they leaning in a bunch? Indicates that their balance isn't fantastic at this point. There's lots you can do for that exercise wise, but it's good to know where their starting point is. Another thing to note during the lope or canter especially is whether they get the correct lead. In the canter there will be a leading leg, and you want to make sure that they can get the correct lead on each side. Again, it's something you can train for, but you want to know where you're starting with a particular horse, and it should be that inside leg that's leading. And he did, so we did notice that on his. If you look at that part of the video, he does get his correct leads. Another thing you want to note with a horse is to make sure that they go both forward and backward, and that back can happen comfortably and evenly, and that they will respond to it readily, that it's not a fight to get them to back. So here you can see he's backing nicely for his handler. You want to see that their head can be down as they back, and they can do that comfortably. So then you also want to see how your prospective horse is with getting tacked up, if it's a riding horse. So comfort level with that saddle pad going on. Are they at all nervous? Do they try to step away? Valkyrie's quite good about this, so that's a good sign. You also want to pay attention to what tack is being used, so you know what they're comfortable with and what has been used in the past. So here I see she's being tacked up Western. That might be a question I'd ask. Has she been ridden English and Western, especially if those are going to be goals of mine? If I know that it might be a hard to fit horse, I might ask what kind of saddle they're using. Noting there that she did want to, there might have been some saddle avoidance as she was kind of moving around, but now that she's standing, she seems all right with it. She seems to be relatively comfortable with the saddle going on. Do you want me to flip her around when you can see it? So one of the big things that you'll want to note on a horse is how they are with getting cinched up. Some horses have what's called cinchiness, which means that they get a little squirrely, uncomfortable with the cinch going on. Here you can see where she's wanting to walk away. That might be an indicator that she doesn't want to stand for the cinch. And watching how her owner is handling it. How has this been handled? You saw that kind of fussy face she made there just now. So those are pretty good indicators that this is a somewhat cinchy horse. She's not kicking or biting, so she's not terribly cinchy. But it's certainly not super comfortable for her. You can see her owner is going nice and slow, so that's a technique to note if you were going to pursue this horse. If you're used to just cinching up quickly, you would need to adjust your practices here. You can see once it's kind of gotten started, she's relaxed. Again, her owner is kind of taking it measure by measure there to cinch up. So yeah, so watching Valkyrie, some of these indicators will tell you temperament-wise that she's a somewhat sensitive horse. You can see she's very expressive, that she'll let you know what she's thinking, which means that she's on the extroverted side. It can be harder with introverted horses who hold it in and then may have a sudden explosion. So it's actually good to have a horse that'll tell you what it's thinking rather than one that's holding things in necessarily. You can see she's still a little uncomfortable with that saddle, but again, she's a very sensitive horse, and so just knowing that ahead of time and watching for these kind of signs that she responds to small movements and small changes. So obviously saddling is a big component. You want to see how they are with bridling. Some horses may not be comfortable either with the bridling process or the bit. Again, you want to watch how the owner is handling the process of bridling in case there's any special tips or tricks for that particular horse. Here you can see she's fairly comfortable standing, getting the halter off. Bit of lick and chew. She might be anticipating there a little bit the bridle coming over. So a little bit of avoidance practice, but nothing too bad. Notice the type of bridle she's using. So she is using a Makati in terms of reins, and you can see that it's a snaffle with the cheek pieces, but it's not a broken snaffle, it's a miler type. She's coming in nicely for bitting. Head up a little bit to avoid, but she's standing nicely. A little bit of head tossing, but she's generally comfortable with this process. You can see her licking and chewing on the bit. A bit of a shake to release tension, but she wasn't terribly uncomfortable with the process of getting bridled. So again, that's something you'd want to ask the owner about. Has she always been in that bit? Have you tried her in different bits? Just to know what the history is. If you do see that, for example, it is a snaffle, you're not going to want to take that horse directly to a curb. You're going to want to continue to work with them in the snaffle because they won't be used to the different type of action. You want to watch the owner ride before you ride, again, so you can watch how the horse is with somebody they're comfortable with before you get on. You see here that she is rechecking the cinch, and it's coming up a fair amount. So that tells me that this horse does bloat, which is to say they kind of suck in some air when you're first going through that process of saddling. And if you don't retighten, that saddle will slip and you can end up with a wreck. And it's just a trait that some horses have, and it's good to know that about any prospective horse that you might be considering. So you want to watch and see if they mount well from the ground. And depending on how tall you are, you want to see if this will work for you or not. How comfortable is the horse? And she was fine with Liz swinging up into the saddle there, with moving the stirrups around. Again, I happen to know this horse is quite sensitive. And it's a good thing to note about your horse. Sometimes it's not necessarily a behavioral vice. They may literally be responding to, you did this, and therefore that's my cue to do that. So walking off, watching her comfort. She's got a nice relaxed head carriage. She's kind of tossing a little bit. Looks like she's ready to go. She's got some energy. But how is she holding herself and responding to her owner? I want to watch, say, the owner's handling. How tight are they holding their horse in versus how much are they giving their own head? You can see she's responding nicely to her owner, or to Liz asking for circle here. So she seems to have nice responsive handling. You can see when we talked about those upright pasterns, that quick little step, bouncy gait she's got. You also want to watch for kind of how soft they are in the mouth. You can see she's kind of fussing with the bit some, but she's generally on a loose rein and not fighting at the bit or pulling on the reins. so she's able to be ridden nice and softly. You want to watch for all those things you're watching for on the lunge line as well, the evenness of gait, the comfort and the way she's moving her back and carrying her head. You can see her ears kind of nicely back, listening to her owner. And then again, you want to watch the owner's body position and think about your own riding and how well does it match with the type of riding you're seeing from the owner or handler. You would want to watch them go through multiple gaits as well, not just the walk. So you want to make sure transitions are soft and smooth and that they respond to their owner's signals and what signals it's taking to get there. As you can see, you barely see anything there, and Valkyrie is coming up to a energetic trot. This is also a very green horse. She has not been under saddle long. And you can see some of the signs there, the little bit of fussiness with the bit. But for a green horse, you can also tell she's extremely sensitive. There was coming down, nice soft transition downward. She didn't need to yank or pull. So that, again, you can see that sensitivity. Nice upward transition into the trot as they barely see a signal. So that tells me extremely sensitive horse. And knowing that she's so green tells me that she has some nice training on her there. So you also want to see how they are to stop all the way. Valkyrie's got some energy. So there was a little bit of a quick pull there, but she did come down very readily. Watching her back, she has a nice energetic backing as well. Watching for that back comfort, the evenness of her steps backward, and just easy responsiveness to that. So nice soft stop on soft rein there. So you can see she's capable of it. She does have energy today, but it's in there. A little bit of fuss, and you can see that's where some of that greenness is coming out, but also her temperament that she likes to move. So if you are not a tall person or you have physical limitations for mounting from the ground, it might be important to you to know if the horse that you're considering can be mounted in alternate ways, such as from a mounting block or from the fence. So that is something else that you would want to check. How well can this horse line up to the fence for you to mount? As you can see, Valkyrie is very comfortable lining up, standing still for Liz to get on. And off she goes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something today about how to select your next horse. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook so that you can follow the journeys of our horses. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization located in Laramie, Wyoming, and your support of this video series directly supports the care of our horses. You can look for more clinics coming up. Stay tuned to our social media.